Scrappy Peeps, Suzanna here today for Therm-O-Web, and we are doing an exchange with Pink Main. These are some of the goodies that I used, and I used those goodies to create this layout. So this layout is a bit of a scrap lift of myself. There is a sketch that goes with that, so if you head over to my channel, you can go ahead and see that. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a grid because I am going to machine stitch in the background. I have 9 circles, and I want each of those circles in the center of that grid there. So I just went ahead and went upstairs and did that with my sewing machine. I like to include a little bit of mixed media, so I'm just using some shimmers on my page. I've got this pink, and I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I cannot remember what colors it is that I'm using. And I'm going to try this blue watercolor that you have to add water to activate, but it's way too light, and so I am going to dab that up and go for something else. You can see on my desk there that I have a whole collection of colors that I thought I might use somehow on the page. I also had thought that at some point I might splatter some of the watercolor. However, it just, the page ends up being really, really busy. So I'm just going to paint that directly on there, and those are going to serve the spot for 2 of my squares. I now have 2 4x3 photos, and I am going to run them through with a circle die and cut out the photo to be the full size of the same size circles that I will use throughout the rest of the layout. Having done this already, I know how I'm going to, I know what size circle works for this particular grid. Then I'm also going to use the Wreath Base 2 die and use the actual base, the circular overlapping circles for the wreath, and I'm going to use that to outline one of my photos, and then I'm going to use it again to outline a piece of pattern paper. But I'm going to come back to that because now I'm going to go back to my circle die. That is not from Pink Main, by the way. And I am going to use the pattern papers from the Be Merry 6x6 paper pad and find the rest of the bases for the circles for my layout. Now, the paper pad comes with many, many more colors than this. I am just going to stick with the blue, the pink, and the red tones for my layout. I find that the grid is very busy as it is, and then I want to fill in the grid with some eye candy, and by using the other really bold colors that were in this collection, it was going to detract, and there was just going to be no visual focus to this page whatsoever, which is why I opted to do what I did with the color palette that I'm using. So this is a design that I created. It is based on one of the design elements that's in the Gina K foil mate that you'll see coming up. I basically went into Design Studio. Actually, I think, no, I didn't go into Design Studio. I went into Photoshop and just used a pen and drew these out. But you'll see the design if you look at the close-up of the foil mates there. And I kind of loosely based this on that. So that's what that top left circle is going to be. Now I'm going to take Christmas from Bold Christmas, and I am going to cut out just the word Christmas because I knew I didn't want Merry Christmas. I knew Christmas Treat was going to be my title for this page. I'm going to use some of the peel and stick toner sheet and run that die through. And I am heating up my hot laminator while I'm doing this, and I will run that through for the title, but I'm still going to figure out the placement of where that's going to go. I tend to get a little OCD, ADD combined about things, so I'm just kind of messing around with where things are going to go. I am scrambling on my desk for, I think what I'm looking for here is actually another piece of blue. I get distracted by the pink, but I knew I wanted that blue to outline that photo there. I'm going to rifle through the pad and pull out another piece of it's the blue stars is what I'm going to end up using there. And I've already used the blue some other blue somewhere else, or I'm going to get to that. I'm sorry, I apologize. So that's the blue stars for pad, and I like the way that that softens that photo and really draws your eye to it much better. So here's the heated laminator, and I have my own stash of folders. All that is parchment paper to run things through. And here I have some Gina K fancy foils, and this is red velvet is the color. I'm going to trim that down to run it through for Christmas. I think that Christmas is all about sparkle for me, and so I like to have as much shimmer as I can on my Christmas pages, but I also liked the texture that the flock is going to add, which I will add later. So the front half of this video is pretty technique intensive on how I use all of these things, and then the back half of the layout is just going to be me decorating the rest of the layout with just random stuff that I've got from my stash. So that there is one of the Gina K foil mates. It's the Holiday Flora. I'm going to use one of my circles for that. And again, I'm going to use some red I've lost the name of it. Red velvet foil, as you see there, and run that through the machine, which I am actually doing. You just can't see, and it's slower to come through because there it is. It's coming through the machine, and typically I can just run that through once, and I am going to save the background of that. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do while that's just kind of sitting there is I'm digging through my Gina K Stampin' Stencil Wish You Joy collection. I'm going to use that die there for a holly leaf, and I'm going to cut that out in red 3 times. And then I'm also going to use the stencil with some of the Duo Bond. It's the new transfer gel, and you don't have to have a hot laminator. You can just run it through with your manual die cut machine. Doesn't that look pretty? I wish I'd shown you the shimmer to that. You'll see it much better in the close-ups of the photo, but it's one of those flowers there that is the basis for that top left blue flower that I've got up there. It is just absolutely gorgeous, and I am going to fussy cut one of those poinsettias and use that as well. This is where I add that blue circle that I knew I was going to add earlier and mentioned, but there it is. And I like the way that that blue sort of offsets some of the red and the pink that's in the layout. So there's the 3 holly leaves that I'm going to use. I will get out my Duo gel in a minute and use the stencil. Now, when I'm stenciling, with these smaller bits, I like to just use a small palette knife. The Stencil Buddy is awesome for when you're using bigger stencils and you want the whole stencil, but for these smaller things, I don't want the gel to end up everywhere, and so this works perfectly for that. So I'm going to do all 3 of them, and then I'm also going to just do it on paper. I'm not sure why I decided to do that. I think because I wasn't sure how many I was going to need. And I always feel like if I have to wait for something to dry, I get very impatient. I'd much rather have extra, and you can always use them for other things. So I'm going to set those aside to dry after I'm going to do it 3 times on this piece of paper as well. And then I'll set those aside to dry. Remember, when you're using the Duo gel, you need to let it turn from white to an opaque color, and that's how you know you're ready to use it. And I'm sorry I skipped that part, but I had flock, just the white flock from a previous release, and ran that through to create the branches on the holly. I ended up thinking that the 3 was too many, so I'm going to set one aside and just use the second one. So lots of techniques here. We've got foil with the peel and stick. We've got foil on the foil mates. We've got flock using the Stampin' Stencil. And then we're also going to have flock that just runs through the die. So the rest of this, if you are not interested in my process, this is just me literally decorating the remainder of the layout. I pulled things by color. Again, I'm going with that blue, pink, and red palette. And at the very end, if you want to skip to maybe the last, I want to say 3 minutes of the video, I am going to pull the flock out again, and I'm going to use the greenery bits from the wreath base to cut out in the blue sky and ruby red flock transfer sheets. I'm just going to cut them straight out of those transfer sheets and use those for some decoration to this. So a cool addition to this Ultra Bond liquid glue is that there are now metal tips that you can literally just screw onto the top of the bottle. Unfortunately, these tips do not come with a way of sealing off that metal tip. So my recommendation to you is definitely invest in the metal tip, but then get a fine sewing pin. And actually, to be honest, this pin is one that I just pulled off of my bulletin board. When my husband gets dress shirts, the dress shirts often come with pins in them. And so this is, and I stick them all in my bulletin board near my work desk. And what I had used them in the past for was to poke open my nodal to open up my fine tip bottle previously. And so I now just stick that pin in there. So you keep seeing me when I'm using this glue stick something in the nozzle of that fine tip applicator. And all that is a pin from one of my husband's dress shirts. And it works perfectly. That way you can seal it off. It doesn't dry, because when it does dry, it gunks up the tip, and you can't, it's really hard. You have to run it through water, warm water, and I just don't have time for that. If I want to use my adhesive, I just want to use it right away. So that pin is a great way of being able to use those metal tips and get that really fine application, especially for like that wreath base. That's super fine. And those leaves, those blue leaves that I put up, those are super fine too. And it's nice to have that metal tip to get into those super skinny spaces. Just a little tip there. So again, I'm adhering things down to create those 9 sort of little palettes that are on the page. The sticker at the bottom left says proper pie. That is where these mince pies are from. My mom is England English, and so I have been raised with the tradition of having mince pies at Christmas, and I have passed that on to my little nuclear family. And we have a pie shop here in Richmond called Proper Pie, and we have special ordered those mince pies as long as they have been ordering them. So those are the Stampin' Stencil holly leaves that have the flock for the stems, and I am using my Gina K roller dot adhesive to adhere all of the non-liquid needed things. And you'll see this is very similar in many ways to the layout that I did previously with the labels. I like the way that the labels break up the circles. And I'm going to put a couple of navy blue elements just from other stickers and stuff to create, you can see that center photo is pretty dark. I lightened it with that blue frame, but it needed a little bit more to add that dark punctuation scattered throughout the layout. And so that's what these stickers, the purpose of these stickers, the blue is going to serve for this. So just filling those circles, while I like them as they are, they kind of just end up being these eyesores on the page if you don't add a little bit of visual interest to them. So each circle is going to have its own sort of cluster of embellishments. I am using, this is last year's, maybe 2 years ago, Pink Fresh Studio Christmas collection. I have a small problem with Christmas, and I collect a lot of the Christmas collections and don't use them because Christmas gets so busy and I never really have time to scrapbook, but I've done a pretty good job of making my way through this particular collection. So again, you can see that navy blue element there. And so when you've got the one at the bottom left, then that photo with the darker sort of background to it, and then the navy blue on the top right, it kind of moves your eye diagonally across the page there and kind of gives you a pattern to follow as you're looking at the layout. You can look at all 9 little palettes there, but by having those darker elements, it guides you a little bit more. I am going to journal in that label on the top right. I will do that off camera, and I am almost finished here. I put a doily on top of the blue circle. Again, it just kind of softens that blue a little bit, and I'm going to finish off the title with these Bella Boulevard letters for treat. I'd lost the I to the top of Christmas, and so I'm going to use a little heart, which is perfect to dot the I with. And that is the title of this layout, Christmas Treat. I will often pull stickers off and just set them on the side of my trimmer and come back to them. That was what I had done with that sticker there. This is a bow that was on a paper clip, again from Bella Boulevard. I can never make the paper clip work for me, so I always pull these bows off the paper clip, and I try and use liquid adhesive to reseal the bow, but it doesn't work very well on the thick felt for me. So I'm going to pull out some of my small Zots from Therm-O-Web and use those. The nice thing about this peel and stick toner sheet is that it is peel and stick. It's actually a sticker. I did not realize that the first time I used this stuff, and so I actually used adhesive on the backing instead of just sticking it down like a sticker, which is perfect with that. So this is that Zot that I referred to close that felt of the bow down. And I have some sequins. Nothing is complete without sequins. And I'll show you a little tip when you're applying sequins with the liquid adhesive. I used to design for Spiegel Mom Scraps. And one of the things that I learned was if you put a little blob of liquid adhesive on your liquid glue on your page, and then you pick up the sequence through the hole of the sequence with the nozzle of your Ultra Bond, that metal tip, it will just pick it up without putting adhesive on it, and then you can set that down into the glue, and the glue kind of sucks up the adhesive. You don't have to push down very hard, and then just lift your nozzle off. And that is a perfect way of getting sequins down without getting a big gluey mess. It even works if you have sequins that doesn't have the hole in it, but you can sometimes get a little bit of residue of the glue on the sequins, but again, the glue dries clear, so it doesn't really matter. So you can see here how I'm putting the glue on the paper, picking up the sequins with the nozzle, the metal tip there. Yep. See, sometimes you can just slide it over too, but typically I just pick it up with that. And that's that pin that I was referring to, the dress pin. You do need to close it off pretty quickly, or it does tend to dry very fast, which is why you see me constantly putting that pin back in there. So I still have the flock. So this is there's been a later release of colors. The first set of colors from Therm-O-Web was really, really bright. These are a little bit more subdued, and the latest color release, and I am using that particular one there is Blue Sky with the foliage goodies from the Wreath Base 2 from Pink Main. I'm going to use some of the blue, and then I'm going to use a couple of pieces in the ruby red as well, and I'm going to just adorn a couple of those circles. 2 of those circles are actually stacked circles, so that top right one there, and then I'm going to put one of the blue sky pieces with the holly leaves. And again, it just adds texture to the page. I like things loose on my page. I don't always adhere everything fully down. It does end up getting squashed down when it's in the albums, but as I'm creating it, I like to have that looseness. And if people were to pull the pages out of the albums, they would puff back up. So I also am going to complete the look to match the look of the page with that ruby red flock there, again using the Pink and Main greenery. It just adds a little bit more pizzazz to, and it pops the dots that are in the middle there. So I'm going to use some Ultra Bond to adhere that down, and that, my friends, will be pretty much the end of that layout. It's going to take me a while to adhere all of these little bits and pieces down. And then what I will actually end up doing is I'm going to put another little, I tie bows out of twine and other goodies, and then I don't like them and I just leave them tied, and they're kind of scattered throughout my workspace. And so I had remembered that I had this navy blue jute bow that I had double tied, and it just looks perfect nestled into those holly leaves there, and I will go ahead and use some liquid adhesive to adhere those in. This is Gina K foam. I love this foam. I like to pop elements up off the page, and I use foam a lot, and I have just discovered this new Gina K foam, and it's awesome. So that, my friends, is our collaboration with Pink and Main and Therm-O-Web. Thanks for stopping in today. I hope you're inspired to pull out some of these goodies for your Christmas and holiday scrapbooking. Enjoy the close-ups. Thanks for stopping in today. I hope to see you again soon. Take care.